Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Beitzah Daf Yud Zayin begins with a discussion of the tefillos of Shabbos and Yom Tov. What happens when Shabbos falls on Yom Tov? What Shemona Esrei do you say? The Gemara then moves on to a discussion of when Yom Tov has 2 days and they both precede Shabbos. How do you make an Erev Tavshilin if you forgot to make one before Yom Tov? Then the Gemara will discuss the halachos of somebody who did not make an Erev Tavshilin, what becomes aser, and if he cooks without an Erev Tavshilin, is he allowed to eat that food, bidi evet or not. So let's begin the Gemara. The Gemara says, what happens when Shabbos and Yom Tov are on the same day? Generally, the Shemona Esrei of Shabbos and the Shemona Esrei on Yom Tov, when they're separate, are 7 brachas long. 3 introductory brachas that are in every Shemona Esrei, 3 closing brachas that are in every Shemona Esrei, and 1 middle bracha that is a bracha for the day. If Shabbos and Yom Tov together, what do you do then? So the Gemara says it's a machlokes between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says you have 8 brachos. You say 1 bracha for Shabbos and 1 bracha for Yom Tov. Beis Hillel says no, you combine it. Now, how do you combine it? How do you combine the middle bracha for Shabbos and Yom Tov? So, the first opinion within Beis Hillel says that you start discussing Shabbos, you end discussing Shabbos, and in the middle of the bracha you mention Yom Tov. You refer to the fact that today is Yom Tov as well. Now, Rebbe says when you finish off, you mention both Shabbos and Yom Tov. You finish off the bracha, you say Mekadesh HaShabbos Yisrael Vazmanim. Therefore, that's the bracha Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos. And then for Yom Tov, it's always Yisrael Vazmanim. I think there's a different version of this that somebody said over to Ravina that it should be Mekadesh Yisrael VaShabbos Vazmanim. First Yisrael, then Shabbos and Zmanim. Ravina said that that's not correct because the kedusha of Shabbos does not depend on the kedusha of Yisrael. Shabbos is every 7 days, every 7th day, with or without Yisrael. The Kedusha of Yom Tov does depend on Yisrael, because Klal Yisrael have to have a Beis Din convene to be Mekadesh L'Chodesh to decide when the month begins in order to establish when Yom Tov is. So therefore it's Mekadesh HaShabbos, independent of Yisrael. Then we say Yisrael, and then Hazmanim. Okay, the Gemara says, Rav Yosef says that is the halacha, it's this approach of Ravina explaining Rebbe and the opinion of Beis Hillel. Now the Gemara brings a brayso what happens when you have Shabbos which is on Rosh Chodesh or on Chol Hamoed. Now Rosh Chodesh and Chol Hamoed do not have their own bracha in Shemona Esrei during the week. They do not incur their own bracha. So in the Shemona Esrei you don't have to add a bracha. But you do have a mention of it. So where do you mention it in Shabbos? So Gemara has 2 opinions. The brayso has 2 opinions. The first one is that you say it in Yalav V'Yavo, which is in the bracha of Moedim, which is in Haidah. And Rabbi Eliezer says you say it, which is in Avodah. You say it's in Ritzei. Yalav Yava is part of Ritzei, which is in Avodah. Then the Gemara's second opinion is that it's in Moedim, and that's Rabbi Eliezer, who says that it is in Haidah, like Al Hanisim, which we say for Purim, and Chanukah, that is in Haidah. So those are the 2 opinions. Again, the Tanakama that it's in Ritzei, and the Rabbi Eliezer says that it's in Moedim. One, the first that it's Yalav Yava, and the second that it's like Al Hanisim. Now, the Gemara says that there are 2 others. There's another opinion here, which is Rosh ben Gamliel together with Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Yochanan ben Breika, and they say you actually say a bracha. In all the Shemona Esreis, you say a bracha, especially where you mention Rosh Chodesh and Chol Hamoed. Now, the opinion said that you say it in the Yalav Yavai also mentions that if you forgot to say it, you have to go back and you have to repeat Shemona Esrei again. Now, Rav Huna says the halacha is not like Rav Shimon Gamliel and Rabbi Shmuel ben Yochanan ben Breika. You do not have to go back. Now, this is all for regular Shemona Esrei. For Musaf, you definitely say a bracha for Chol Hamoed and Rosh Chodesh, because Chol Hamoed and Rosh Chodesh both require a Musaf of their own, so you mention them in the Musaf Karbanos of that bracha in that Shemona Esrei. Okay, now the Gemara discusses what happens when you have 2 days Yom Tov on Thursday and Friday, followed immediately by Shabbos. So you had to make an Erev Techumin and an Erev Tavshilin for Shabbos. You also really had to make one for Yom Tov. You're supposed to do both of the things before Yom Tov. If you didn't do it before Yom Tov, you're supposed to do it on Wednesday, so that it would be done before Thursday, Friday, Yom Tov. You didn't do it, now what? Can you do it on Yom Tov to make it for Shabbos? So if you did, you would do it with a Tanai, and that would work as follows. On the first day of Yom Tov, you would say, look, I need to make an Erev Tchumen. Today might be Yom Tov. If today is Yom Tov, I can't make an Erev Tchumen, because you can't make an Erev Tchumen on Yom Tov. Erev Tchumen has to be made before Yom Tov. So then I'm not doing anything. If, however, today is not Yom Tov, then tomorrow is Yom Tov, because again, it's only one of the 2 days really. It's really a Sfeika D'Yoma. So then I'm making an Erev Techumin. The Erev Techumin that I'm setting up now should work for Yom Tov and the Shabbos that follows. As far as Erev Tavshilin, it also has to be done before Yom Tov. Here it's a little bit different. You say, if today is Yom Tov, then tomorrow is weekday. Tomorrow is Chol. I don't need an Erev Tavshilin. I can cook tomorrow for Shabbos. There's no problem. If, however, tomorrow is Yom Tov, then today is nothing. I can make an Erev Tavshilin now, and you set it up in that way. Now, are you allowed to do these 2 Erevin on Yom Tov, on the first day of Yom Tov for the potential second day of Yom Tov and the Shabbos that follows? The Gemara quotes 2 statements. Rava says you can do an Erev Tavshilin, and Rav Chia bar Ashi says you can make an Erev Tchumin. Says the Gemara that you're allowed to make an Erev Tavshilin, everybody would agree to. That you can make an Erev Tchumin is not so simple. The one who said Erev Tavshilin would not agree to Erev Tchumin because you're not supposed to create an Erev Tchumin on Yom Tov. Erev Tchumin means you're setting up your place of living, your zone, your central Mokum Shvisa for Shabbos or for Yom Tov, and then your Tchum will depend on that. That you have to do before Yom Tov. You're not supposed to do that on Yom Tov. I could strongly hear that you would not be allowed to do that on Yom Tov, even if you're going to make a Tanai and say that if today's Yom Tov, it's not going to work. Okay, now the Gemara moves on to discuss what type of cooking or food preparation requires an Erev Tavshilin. Erev Tavshilin here, the Gemara is referring to from Yom Tov to Yom Tov. To cook from one day of Yom Tov to a second day of Yom Tov. So the Gemara quotes a Beitzah that says you're not allowed to bake from one day of Yom Tov for the second day of Yom Tov. And it says that really you could fill up a pot with more meat than you need and cook it from one day to the next. That's what you're allowed to do even from Yom Tov to Chol. You're allowed to cook more than you need on Yom Tov and have it left over for Chol. It's just one act of putting the pot on the fire. So the Mishnah says you're allowed to fill up the pot. The Beitzah says you're allowed to fill up the pot with more than you need. You're allowed to put more water in a jug. You're allowed to draw more water in a jug than you need because it's all one action. But if you're going to actually to bake bread in the oven, so there each piece has to be stuck to the side of the oven, and each piece has to be removed from the oven. Those are separate actions. Each separate action has to be justified, and it's not. You need to fill up water in a pot that you need, so that's one big scoop. To put a pot full of food on the fire, that's one thing. But to stick each piece of the dough on the wall of the oven, that's a separate activity. You're only allowed to do that you're justified for. You cannot say, well, I'm just doing more. Says the Gemara, though, Rav Shimon ben Elazar says that you are allowed to fill up as many breads in the oven as you need, and that's because more bread in the oven helps the one piece of bread that you might actually need for Yom Tov, helps that bake stronger. The baking is improved by the other breads that are there. Rashi explains that the space within the oven is shrunk by having more breads there, and therefore the fire has more of an impact, and it bakes faster and cleaner. And therefore you are allowed to do that. Okay, now the Gemara wants to know somebody who did not set up an Erev Tavshilin at all, what is he not allowed to do? Is he not allowed to cook, or is his food not allowed to be cooked? What's the difference? The Gemara says the difference is if he needs food made for him, he'll have to give his flour or his possessions, his food items away for somebody else to cook, and then that person could give it back to him as a gift. But he wouldn't be able to have somebody cook food for him with his own foods. So the Gemara quotes a Beitzah that's pretty clear. The Beitzah says somebody who didn't make an Erev Tavshilin, he's not allowed to bake, he's not allowed to cook, he's not allowed to warm things up. He's not allowed to do it for himself or for others, and others are not allowed to do it for him. What could he do? He can give his food as a gift to somebody else, and that person can prepare it and give it back to him, should he so desire. So you see clearly that his food is usher as well. Now the Gemara wants to know what happens if somebody went ahead and he cooked food on Yom Tov for Shabbos without an Erev Tavshilin. What is he supposed to do now? So the Gemara brings a proof from a very similar Beitzah. The Beitzah says somebody who did not make an Erev Tavshilin, what should he do? He should go and he should give his food to others, and those others can bake for him and cook for him, and then give it back to him. So the Gemara says, if he had another solution, and that's he could just cook and it won't become usher, so let it say that if he did cook it, it won't become usher, then he has another solution of having food to eat. The implication is that if he would go ahead and cook it against the halacha, the food would become usher, and that wouldn't solve his problem at all. The Gemara says, no, that's not a question. When we're trying to give solutions for what you should do, we're not going to include something that includes a violation. We're not going to tell you to violate the rules. We only list the things that you are allowed to do. Okay, now the Gemara says, well, maybe we have another proof to the question of whether the food becomes usher if you cook it without an Erev Tavshilin. We have a Beitzah that says somebody who made an Erev Tavshilin is allowed to bake and cook, and he's allowed to be matmin, he's allowed to insulate his food to warm it up. If he wants to eat his Erev, he won't have the Erev anymore, he's allowed to do that. But if he eats it before he finished the baking and the cooking and the insulating, then he's not allowed to bake and cook and insulate anymore because he won't have Erev Tavshilin anymore. He's not allowed to do it, not for himself, not for others, and others are not allowed to bake and cook and warm for him. What is he allowed to do? The best thing to do is to cook something for Yom Tov now. Again, he has no Erev Tavshilin at this point, so he's really in our situation, our question of what's halach if you don't have an Erev Tavshilin. So what he's allowed to do is he's allowed to cook for Yom Tov. If there's anything left over for Shabbos, he could use that for Shabbos. However, no tricks. He can't play games. He can't cook more than he needed and say, oh, look at that, I have stuff left over. Or he should say that, well, I might be expecting some visitors, so I can cook for my guests. Oh, the guest didn't come. So these games you cannot play at all. And now, if you do play games, the halacha is that it is usher. All that food is usher. So you see clearly that if he cooks without an Erev Tavshilin, the food becomes usher. That's different. That's because he tried to play a game. And it could be that the Rabbanan made extra strict rules about Erev Tavshilin where somebody tries to play games to get out of it because we were afraid people were going to mess around with it and destroy the halacha of Eruv Tavshilin altogether by having tricks and games. And therefore we're extra strict on that. But if somebody didn't make an Erev Tavshilin at all, and he cooked by mistake and he forgot, nobody's going to learn from that this is what you could do. He'll realize that was a mistake. He'll see that he wasn't allowed to eat that. He'll see that this wasn't the right thing to do. If he plays a game, he'll think that it's permitted and this is the right thing to, and this is okay what he did. That's why we're strict on it. If somebody didn't play a game, he just accidentally cooked and he found out afterwards that he wasn't allowed to do that, it could be that we'll say that is permitted. The Gemara gives another reason this might not be approved. The Gemara says this might be the opinion of Hananiah according to Beis Shammai. Because Hananiah says in the name of Beis Shammai, the very strict halachas in Erev Tavshilin. If to be allowed to bake, you have to leave over an Erev Tavshilin of a baked object. To be allowed to cook, you have to leave over a cooked object. And to be able to insulate, you have to be prepared with an insulated object. You have to do each one separately. It's a very strict approach. It's not like Hillel says you just do one thing, one cooked object, and that's enough for all types of cooking activities to do from Shabbos to Yom Tov. So, Hanani, the opinion of Beis Shammai, has this strict opinion, and therefore they may be the ones who say that it becomes usher if you played a game and you tried to pretend that you needed it for Yom Tov and then left it over for a Shabbos. But us, we wouldn't necessarily say that way. Okay, now the Gemara wants to try to bring another proof again to our question of what's the halacha if somebody doesn't have an Erev Tavshilin and he cooks anyway. What's the halacha there? Somebody violated the Isser of Erev Tavshilin, the Isser of cooking from Shabbos to Yom Tov. The Gemara brings a Mishnah that says somebody is not supposed to take Maisa from his fruits on Shabbos. But if he did, then if it was b'shogeg, if it was by accident, he's allowed to eat it. If it was b'mezid, if it was on purpose, he's not allowed to eat it. So why do we say that he's not allowed to eat it? Obviously, you make mistakes, you're not allowed to eat it. It becomes usher now. Someone says that might be referring to a situation where he had other fruit to eat. So we allow him to eat the other fruit. And this ones that he was ma'aser, we say is usher. It's not such a pressing situation because he has other things to eat. In the case of Erev Tavshilin, they won't have anything to eat at all because he didn't cook anything. Another case, another proof, very similar structure. You're not allowed to put kelim that are tamei in the mikvah on Shabbos to be able to use them. If somebody did, if he tabled it by accident, he didn't realize it was usher, he's allowed to use them. If he did it on purpose, violating the Isser on purpose, then he's not allowed to eat it. Again, you see he's not allowed to use it if he violated the Isser. And says, again, that might be because he has other kelim that he could use, or it might be because he could borrow kelim from somebody else. Next proof, it says if you cook on Shabbos, if you cook, again, by shogeg without realizing that was usher, you're allowed to eat it. But mezid, you're not allowed to eat it. Again, same proof. The says that's different. There you violated an Isser d'oraisa, chilul Shabbos. That's why you're not allowed to eat what you cooked b'mezid. Erev Tavshilin is not quite Chilul Shabbos, and therefore could be that you are allowed to eat that. Gemara now refers back to our Mishnah and comments on the next phrase in the Mishnah. The Mishnah had said, "There's machlokas between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. How much do you have to set aside as Erev Tavshilin?" Beis Hillel had said 1 cooked dish, and Beis Shammai had said 2 cooked dishes, but they both agree that a fish that is covered with egg and roasted together is considered to be 2 cooked dishes, and therefore it's okay. It says the Gemara, there's a different, Bryce has a different version of that. According to this version, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai both agree that you need 2 cooked dishes. Machlokas is whether the fish with the egg on it counts as 2 or it counts as 1. According to Beis Hillel, it counts as 2. According to Beis Shammai, according to Beitzah Daf, it counts as 1. According to Beis Shammai, it counts as 2 cooked dishes. However, if you were to stuff a fish with cooked egg, or with pieces of karti, pieces of leek, or squash, that's okay. That definitely counts as 2 cooked dishes, and that would be fine according to all opinions. It says, however, the halacha is like our Tana, and according to the opinion of Beis Hillel, that that it's okay the way it is. Says the Gemara further, again, the Mishnah had said that if you lost or ate your Erev Tavshilin, you cannot cook based on it anymore. Says Abaye, if you started making a dough, and then your Erev was eaten, you can finish it. Once you started it beheter, it's alright, you're allowed to finish making it and finish the baking process.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.